Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for March 29th of 2024. And today we do have a marginal threat for northern Illinois into eastern Iowa and southern Wisconsin there. Threats for today do include only a 5% hail risk. For tomorrow, we don't have any areas that are currently issued for the risk for severe thunderstorms, but we will be watching for some certain locations for the potential of severe thunderstorms, like maybe somewhere in this area potentially for a marginal threat or higher potentially being added, but as of right now we don't see anything. For our day 3 outlook, we do have a fairly large marginal threat extending from Nebraska and Kansas all the way into West Virginia there, across southern Iowa, northern Missouri, central Illinois, central Indiana, southern Ohio, and northern Kentucky there. And as of right now, this is only a probabilistic 5%. And then for day 4 to day 8 outlook, this is where things really get crazy, because we are watching for the potential of significant severe thunderstorms, especially for day 4 outlook on the on the 1st, April 1st. We do have a 30% risk for severe thunderstorms, which is equivalent of an enhanced risk for Missouri, Kansas into eastern Oklahoma there, with a very broad 15% extending all the way from southwestern Ohio and northern Kentucky all the way into northern and northeastern Texas there. So we definitely are watching for the potential of potentially very significant severe thunderstorms. This is the first time I've ever forecasted a 30% on our day 4 to day 8 outlook. So if confidence is this high in the risk for severe thunderstorms, we are definitely watching for the potential of significant severe thunderstorms. And then for day 5 outlook, we could continue to see the potential for significant severe thunderstorms, but I doubt the risk will be as high as April 1st, but we could still see the potential of significant severe thunderstorms across the eastern half of the United States, including southern Pennsylvania, southern Ohio, southern Indiana, Kentucky, majority of Tennessee, northern Alabama, northern Georgia, northern Mississippi, the majority of West Virginia, and the majority of Virginia, back into Maryland, as well as a small portion of the Appalachians there. So we definitely have a couple big days ahead of us. Taking a look at our WBC outlook, starting off with our excessive rainfall forecast. For today, we do have a dual slight risk one for the Los Angeles metro region. It actually may be a little bit to the north of the Los Angeles metro region, but we also do have a very broad marginal threat across the majority of the coast and into some of the lower parts of California in the valley between some of the higher elevations. And then we also do have a slight risk for some scattered flash flooding for the far eastern Maine there. So we definitely do have a couple places where we may be watching for the potential of some flash flooding. And then for day 2 outlook, we're going to continue to see a marginal threat for southern California into southern Nevada and Arizona, as well as a slight risk for southern California there. Then for day 3 outlook on April 1st, we do have a marginal threat for southern Arizona and southern California. For our winter weather outlooks for today, we are watching for the potential of some pretty heavy snowfall for Maine there, as well as the potential of some heavy snowfall for northeastern portions of Minnesota there, as well as the main event being the potential for heavy snowfall in some elevated areas of the Rockies, as well as elevated areas of California into Nevada. And then for tomorrow, we are going to continue to see the potential for heavy snowfall for a lot of the elevated regions in the Rockies, and then we may be able to see the potential of some heavy snowfall on April 2nd, potentially extend into some of the Central Plains for South Dakota and northern Nebraska there. Taking a look at our weather models, starting off with our 500 millibars, and how that's going to work in conjunction with our surface observations. As of right now, we do have a stationary front that is extended across this region. This stationary front is likely a little bit further to the north than what is currently displayed here. A lot of temperature models do have the stationary front around this region, and that's likely what's going to trigger the risk for severe thunderstorms, as this surface low that's located over here is going to translate into the Iowa region by later this afternoon, and that stationary front should trigger our severe thunderstorms and the potential for some small to medium hail. As far as our upper level pattern here, we don't really see too much activity as far as a trough. It does look like we may be able to see a little bit of a short wave along this fairly broad, fairly zonal flow. We may be able to see potentially a little bit of a short wave that made back into this region. It's honestly quite hard to tell, but that may be able to amplify the risk for severe thunderstorms and help support the risk for severe thunderstorms on the northern end of this fairly broad zonal flow. And we may be able to see mid-level flow that may be able to get upwards of 50 miles per hour to potentially 40 miles per hour across this region. So 40 and 50 miles per hour should definitely provide us with some fairly decent speed shear, but we will look at the at our 200 millibars. Taking a look at our 700 millibars in our low-level jet, I typically look at this for our risk for tornadoes. However, we don't have a risk for tornadoes, but we do have a fairly decent low-level jet across this region with a 700 millibar flow that may be able to get upwards of the mid 40 to potentially the low 50 miles per hour that may feed into this region. So we should definitely see quite a bit of speed shear potentially come out of this. And we should definitely see the directional shear for tornadoes. However, we shouldn't really see too much surface instability. That's going to be the case with the risk for tornadoes across this region. Despite having shear, we aren't expected to see any surface instability, and that's not going to allow for any surface-rooted updrafts. So that will eliminate the potential for rotation developing at the surface and will not allow for a tornado risk. But we should definitely get some speed shear out of this. Taking a look at our 200 millibars and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms, mainly looking at our speed shear and the potential for our wind vector spreading and our defluence. Let's start off with our defluence. It doesn't really look like we're going to see too much wind vector spreading. It does look like the majority of our wind vectors are probably going to be taking the majority of the same path in the enter region of this low pressure system that's further off to the east. So we shouldn't really see too much isobar and wind vector spreading. However, at our 200 millibars, we are definitely expected to see quite a lot of strong flow upwards of potentially 90, 97, 98 knots, which should definitely provide us with some decent speed shear. However, with our 500 millibars being around 50 knots, in around 40, 50, 60 knots, we shouldn't really see too much speed shear, but we should definitely see some speed shear. Taking a look at our bulk shear at our 0 to 6 kilometers, I'm not going to take a look at our storm relative velocity because I'm not really too concerned about a tornado risk today, but the hail risk is the main thing that is concerning. As of right now, we do have potentially around 50, upper 50, mid 50 to potentially maybe a low 60 somewhere in there, but mainly around the upper to mid 50 knots of bulk shear. Definitely some fairly decent speed shear, definitely support at least a marginal risk for hail. However, we definitely shouldn't really see too much of a hail, not really that much of a big hail risk come out of this. This is still a marginal risk. Before I go ahead and take a look at the actual environment, I'm going to go over a composite reflectivity so we can go over the when and where our storms are expected to fire and how long they're expected to be across this region. We're going to start off with some rainfall, it appears, up until around 8 p.m. and then our storms are expected to begin firing around the Davenport area, a little bit to the southwest potentially, but around the Davenport area around 9 p.m. This is Central Time, so do subtract an hour off this. I am recording this in Eastern Standard Time, so what you are currently seeing, it does say 10 p.m. up top, but it is actually 9 p.m. in local time for this model. And the storms are expected to continue with up until around 6 a.m. very early morning of tomorrow, when the majority of our rain showers and storms are going to be moving off into the rest of the Ohio River Valley. And based off of some general radar analysis, these storms are definitely going to be pretty widespread. We could definitely see some fairly widespread heavy rainfall. However, our risk for hail may be pretty isolated because we don't really have too much of an hail indicator as of right now. We do have some heavy rainfall and some deep reflectivity on our composite reflectivity, which may be more indicative of the potential of some heavy rainfall, maybe some small hail. But we do have a couple areas like right here where we do have a little bit of some hail. So our hail risk is definitely pretty marginal, but it is going to be pretty isolated with some very widespread and heavy rain showers across this region. Taking a look at our dew point values, and then we'll take a look at our heat and how that's going to affect the potential for instability across this region. As of right now, we aren't really expected to see too much moisture that these storms are going to fire in. We may be able to see dew points that may linger around the 30s to the low and mid 40s, which is honestly not really good whatsoever for strong instability, and will lead to very limited hail risk across this region. We need moisture for hail because that means that there's a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, and there's more water content that can freeze and form into hail that can fall down across this region. So again, as I was saying, our hail risk is definitely pretty limited, especially by our dew points in our shear. Our shear is fine, but it's mainly our dew points and our instability that's going to be lacking. Taking a look at our temperatures across this region, you can see our stationary front, as I was mentioning, pretty clearly here. It's not really sharp, but you can definitely see it there somewhat, where we do have a broad but definitely noticeable temperature gradient. So that's going to be what storms are going to fire off of, and storms are expected to fire pretty late in the afternoon, so temperatures are definitely going to be pretty cold, but still maybe warm with a crisp 60, mid 60s, low 60s across this region to the south of the stationary front in the warm sector, which will overall lead to some fairly limited instability, especially with the sun setting as storms fire. On top of that, with our weak moisture, we're definitely going to see weak instability. Taking a look at our lapse rates and how that's going to affect our instability and our potential for hail across this region, we are expected to see a weakening lapse rates as the sun sets. However, we should see storms fire in an environment that is going to have lapse rates around the low to mid 7s to upper 6. Definitely fairly decent in terms of lapse rates. And should definitely support a more marginal hail risk and maybe some better instability with how weak our moisture is and how limited our temperatures are. So these lapse rates are definitely needed to help with the risk for severe thunderstorms. If we didn't have conducive lapse rates, I wouldn't really see the risk for hail at all or any severe thunderstorms in general. But with these lapse rates, we could definitely see some hail come out of this because it will broaden the sector for development of hail aloft. Taking a look at our sub-100 millibar temperatures and our convective inhibition and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms, we are definitely expected to see quite a lot of warm air advection out of the south-southwest at our 700 millibars, which will lead to convective inhibition and a potential elevated mix layer across this region. However, it does look like the region of concern may be pretty well out of the way of our convective inhibition, because we are going to see more convective inhibition over the warm sector and to the south of that stationary front. However, it does look like storms may fire a little bit to the north along that stationary front. However, any storms that fire too far to the south may not even fire at all, because there's maybe a little bit too much convective inhibition. But it does look like that in the center of our warm sector, we do have a lack of convective inhibition, which is going to allow for the potential of severe thunderstorm development further down south. So overall, we do have some convective inhibition, may allow for a little bit of instability building. However, regardless, our dew points and our temperatures are basically nothing. Taking a look at our most unstable cape, I'm not going to look at surface instability or our 0 to 3 kilometer instability because I'm not concerned about a tornado risk. And like I said earlier, we aren't going to see any surface instability because if we did, and with how this environment looks, we would have a tornado risk. But because we don't have any surface instability, we can infer that we aren't going to have a tornado risk, and vice versa. So taking a look at our most unstable cape, which is going to be mostly aloft, we are expected to see most unstable instability that may be able to get around the mid triple digits to the potentially approaching the upper triple digits, but may mainly stay anywhere from 400 to potentially 600 and 700, maybe an isolated 800. I'm honestly quite surprised that our instability is getting even above 700 joules per kilogram in some locations because of how weak our moisture is, but it may be a result of our lapse rates. But our aloft instability should definitely be conducive of a marginal hail risk, especially with what the environment has already showed us. Taking a look at our mesoanalysis page, mainly looking at our large hail parameter. As of right now, our surface low is mainly around this area roughly, with our stationary front currently extending somewhere around here. So we do have an area in the warm sector up to 8 in the on the large hail parameter, and as this low pressure system translates over to the east, and the stationary front kind of pushes off to the north a little bit and triggers the risk for severe thunderstorms in the region of concern. All of this will likely also be translated with it to the region of concern, which will indicate the potential for some small hail across this region. I doubt our large hail parameters are really going to go up to 8 in reality because we do have low end instability and low end dew points, so low end temperatures, especially when storms fire. So these may be less than expected, but we definitely do have a marginal hail risk across this region. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong with this forecast or would like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are One Nation Weather, Weather Watcher, and JaxonWX. Weather Watcher does content for Europe if you're interested in that. One Nation Weather does pretty digestible and pretty good and decent content for the entire United States, and I highly recommend his channel. And then JaxonWX does do storm chasing content, which I will likely partner with in the upcoming risk for severe thunderstorms on April 1st. So definitely make sure you're staying tuned for live stream and watching for any updates on that. And I recommend you check out his channel. Those links are in the description, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys potentially tomorrow with another forecast.